If I only knew. By Wanderlove. Chapter 16. After a decade together with a wide-open force bond, they are intimately attuned to each and every shift in each other's emotions. Ahsoka complains and says it's creepy, the way they sometimes operate more as if they are a single person, moving gracefully in sync, finishing each other's sentences, and carrying out entire conversations in the blink of an eye. But it does make for some fantastic moving meditation sessions, and also some fantastic sex. Suddenly, the force shifts in warning. Anakin curses, and Obi-Wan scrambles to wipe his hand on a corner of the bedsheets and snatch at his sleep pants discarded early last night. The tranquil, heady air is shattered by the bang of a door opening and the patter of two tiny sets of feet. "Daddy, Papa! Grandma Shmi is here! Grandma Shmi is here!" is the only epic warning they get before two small balls of energy dive bomb them, both of them punched in the gut by excited 8-year-old elbows and knees. Rex pokes his head into the bedroom, an apologetic smile on his face. "I held them back as long as I could," he says. "One would think that years of watching Anakin and Ahsoka would make you a much more effective babysitter," Obi-Wan grumbles with very little heat. Luke and Leia shoot gap-toothed smiles at their Uncle Rex. "Thanks for the sleepover, Uncle Rex," Luke sing-songs ever polite. "And the waffles! I love your waffles!" "Of course, Big Blue," Rex responds, using the clone's preferred name for Luke. They had been horrified at the concept of calling Luke and Leia by their given names. "You mean they don't get to choose their names?" "But generally just refer to the twins by their chosen nicknames, Big Blue and Little General." Obi-Wan was really looking forward to when the twins were 35 and horribly embarrassed by the fact that the clones were still referring to them by the childish nicknames they'd chosen for themselves when they were 3. Rex gives a little salute and disappears, off to teach his weekly How to Deal with Jedi Mumbo Jumbo 101 seminar for the families of Force-sensitive children brought to Yavin 4. Technically, the official title was Introduction to the Force for non-Force sensitives, but Obi-Wan despaired of anyone at his school ever referring to the classes by their official titles. He had worked hard to properly name those classes, and he hated to see all his work ignored, but he also recognized the losing battle all too well. Anakin sits up, picking Leia up as he repositions himself against the headboard and uses a judicious application of the Force to keep the bedsheet positioned strategically over his lap. He deposits Leia back in his lap once situated and directs his full attention to his daughter. "Grandma Shmi's here, huh?" he asks, bopping at Leia's nose with his mechno finger. She giggles. "And this was so important it couldn't wait just 30 more minutes." "She brought Uncle Hondo with her!" Luke adds excitedly from his perch wrapped around Obi-Wan. For an 8-year-old human, he's doing an excellent impression of some sort of clinging sentient vine. "Oh, Plo won't like that," Obi-Wan murmurs, lip-slitching. Plo Koon always pouted for days after Hondo Ohnaka's visits, when Hondo's wild stories and fabulous gifts ensured Plo was temporarily dethroned as the twins' favorite uncle. "Well then, it sounds like we should all get dressed so that we can all go say hello. Go on now, scooch." Luke and Leia scramble off the bed, chattering to each other the whole way in a strange mixture of twin speak and Amataka that they preferred. 10 years later, and Obi-Wan is still barely proficient in the secret language of Tatooine's slaves. It doesn't help that the twins are always throwing him off with their terrible grammar and completely made-up words. The noise fades as they run to their room, and Obi-Wan blinks for a moment, feeling very much as if a great hurricane has swept in and out of the room in the past few minutes. Luke and Leia are truly a force of nature. They take too much after Anakin and Padme to be anything else. The twins were the result of a diplomatic mission to wild space gone awry. The natives had none too gently insisted that Anakin and Padme participate in a local fertility ritual before they'd allow them to begin any negotiations, and there must have been something in the tea they had forced Anakin and Padme to ingest, because both Padme's implanted birth control and the Plan B pill she'd hastily taken post-diplomatic disaster had failed spectacularly. Obi-Wan likes to joke that the Force had really wanted grandchildren, a joke that had Anakin and Padme now accept with a lot more grace 8 years later. In the end, it had all worked out better than Obi-Wan had first feared, apart from a 3-month period in the beginning where Padme and Anakin hadn't been able to look each other in the eye. They had settled easily into a slightly odd but loving co-parenting arrangement. Padme adored the twins, but freely admitted that she was too busy with restructuring the entire Republic to give them the attention they deserved. And so Luke and Leia spent most of the year with their fathers, and are shipped off to Naboo during Senate recesses, where their mother spoils them rotten and dresses them up in fabulous little outfits that they, of course, destroy as soon as they land back on Yavin 4. Anakin drops a quick kiss to Obi-Wan's lips, then hurriedly rolls out of bed. Leaving the twins alone and unsupervised for too long is a recipe for disaster, so it's probably for the best that Anakin is hurrying to clean up the evidence of his and Obi-Wan's activities so that he can chase after the twins. Still, Obi-Wan can't help but be a little regretful that the moment has been so thoroughly broken. But hopefully, if all his plans go well, they'll have at least 2 weeks of romantic, sexy, and completely twin-free mornings. Obi-Wan smiles to himself and feels a small flutter in his stomach. Today is the day. As soon as he secures Shmi's blessing, he's going to ask Anakin to marry him. It takes a little effort and some finagling, but soon enough, Luke and Leia have been wrestled out of their pajamas and into clean clothes. Your father and I need to speak with your Aunt Ahsoka before we can go see Grandma Shmi, Obi-Wan warns the twins. He had been hoping to damp their enthusiasm, but seems only to have redirected it. Auntie sucks! Luke and Leia exclaimed, linking hands with their fathers and practically dragging them out of their little house and in the humid, dense jungle area. Obi-Wan patiently allows them to lead their little group toward Ahsoka's own dwelling, towards the outskirts of the residential quarters and closer to the main cluster of temples where most classes, communal meals, and meetings took place. Nearby, Fives and Echo are repairing a set of droids and laugh at the sight they make, 2 grown men being led around by 2 very determined little children. Anakin shoots them a rude gesture when Luke and Leia aren't looking. Cutting through the residential quarters is a fair bit of a walk, the quarters themselves being quite a bit larger than they had originally planned. Only a handful of persons were supposed to live in the outlying buildings, in order to most of the students and teachers centrally located. But within a few years, it had become clear that they had drastically underestimated the popularity of their new school. These days, Yavin 4 is home to close to 8,000 residents. There are, of course, the core 1,000 Yavinist Jedi, the former Jedi Knights and Masters who had officially chosen to break with the code and join the reform movement founded by Obi-Wan and Plo Koon nearly a decade ago. But there are also hundreds of non-traditional students, 1,000 of their family members, some 3,500 clones, plus 1,000 or so more short-term residents. These visitors could stay anywhere from a few days to a few months and were often other clones, Orthodox Jedi, or former separatists trying to grapple with the effects of the war on their lives. Once, Obi-Wan had hoped that these sorts of guests would trickle off eventually, as the years passed and the wounds of war faded, but healer Jakai, who had happily taken up Anakin's invitation to act as Yavin 4's chief mind healer, had only shook his head at Obi-Wan when he expressed such a view. Healing from trauma isn't linear. Some sentients will be fine for years and then have a sudden episode. Others will periodically relapse and recover before the rest of their lifespans, he had explained in an unbearably sad voice. For as long as there is anyone left alive to remember the war, we will continue to see sentients seeking our help. I'd recommend just clearing an area of the brush and designating it for additional housing. It's hardly going to let up, not in our lifetimes at least. Hello! Luke's cheerful voice pulls Obi-Wan out of his dark thoughts. He watches fondly as Luke and Leia wave enthusiastically to random passers-by and receive joyful greetings in return. The two of them have all of the temple residents wrapped around their little fingers. It's cute in moments like these, decidedly less cute when Luke convinces Fives that, yep, Daddy and Papa would totally approve of him test flying the brand new X-Wings. Finally, they come to a stop in front of Ahsoka's little cabin, a small garden of strange jungle fungi out front. Ahsoka is currently perched on one of the largest of the mushroom caps, cross-legged, eyes closed, and smiling softly to herself as she meditates. Hiya, Auntie Socks! Leia chirps. Hello, little one! Ahsoka keeps her eyes closed, her serene smile turning gentle, mysterious. Off somewhere exciting today. Grandma Shmi is here! Oh, no, that is exciting. Ahsoka agrees indulgently, finally opening her eyes. Barriss Offee emerges from the stone dwelling behind Ahsoka, drawn out by the commotion. She's as cool and collected as always, not a single fold of cloth out of place, despite the damp hot air of Yavin and the early hour. The same cannot be said of Senator Chuchi, who follows closely behind and looks decidedly bed-rumpled and grumpy. Her hair frizzes and curls as she yawns sleepily. "Morning, Master Kenobi, Master Skywalker," she says. Obi-Wan and Anakin send her apologetic looks. Obi-Wan hates to intrude on their time together like this, when the senator only manages to escape her duties once a month or so to visit Barriss and Ahsoka. "What's this I hear about your grandmother?"
"She's here, and she probably brought presents,"
Luke explains excitedly. "Ah, presents! But have you been good enough to earn those presents?" Senator Chuchi responds, her accented voice curling wide and long across the words. "My understanding is that naughty little boys and girls don't get presents from their grandmothers."
"We've been really good,"
Leia insists. All the adults raise their eyebrows, and Leia stamps the floor.
We have, I swear."
"Hondo's here as well," Obi-Wan interjects hastily, partially to redirect the brewing tantrum, and partially to steer the conversation back to the true reason why he and Anakin have stopped by. Barriss, Ahsoka, and Senator Chuchi share a look. Shmi usually only brings Hondo along on her visits when there is illicit cargo to be moved. Tatooine might be free, but there were still hundreds of planets under the control of the Hutts and Zygerians. Ahsoka and Barriss led the Yavinists' efforts to help the slaves of these worlds. Ahsoka had taken over Shmi's spy network and assumed the mantle of fulcrum, whilst Barriss continued to investigate Depor's new chip designs and develop surgical procedures to counter said changes. After Barriss dechipped and taught the procedure to the newly freed slaves, then Ahsoka would train them in basic combat and counterintelligence. Together, they gave them the tools they needed to return to their planets of origin and set up a homegrown freedom network. Obi-Wan was also fairly sure Senator Chuchi was involved somehow. He had learned from personal experience how hard it was to share any secrets from someone who shared your life so intimately. But whatever it was, Ahsoka and Barriss kept it tightly under wraps to protect their lover's life and political career.
Perhaps we should join you then,"
Ahsoka says finally. Senator Chuchi whispers something to Barriss, and Barriss nods in understanding, pressing a quick kiss to her cheek as they duck back inside together. Luke's eyes dart back and forth between Ahsoka and his father's eyes wide.
"Are you moving the slaves? Can I come? I've been practicing my piloting,"
he asks, hopefully. Leia's dream jobs changed every week depending on whoever she was enamored with at that particular moment. Currently, they were on Princess and Chancellor of the Republic, just like her idol, Uncle Bail. Obi-Wan doesn't have the heart to tell her that she would be a terrible chancellor. She has far too much of Anakin and Shmi's fire and unwillingness to compromise. But Luke has held one dream and one dream only ever since he was 2 years old. Rebel pilot. Ahsoka laughs and ruffles his hair.
"Not this time, Skyboy. Children should just be children, not soldiers. But maybe one day, when you're older."
She replies, the bitterness of her words soothed a little by time. She hops to her feet and goes to stand by Anakin. Barriss reemerges, alone this time, and raises an eyebrow at Luke and Leia. "Well then, best not to keep your grandmother waiting," she hints. It's unsubtle, but does the trick nicely enough, sending Luke and Leia careening away and guiding their group back onto a large, well-trafficked footpath. It's only a short while longer before they're inside of the small but bustling landing pad area. Luke and Leia eagerly scan the ships, both with their eyes and with the Force. Their heads whip to the left and zero in on a flashy red cruiser and the small, gray-haired figure in brown standing beside it.
"Grandma Shmi!"
they shriek. Shmi kneels down and opens her arms.
"My little storm, my little dragon,"
she says as Luke and Leia barrel into her embrace. While some like to say that Leia is Daddy's little girl or that Luke is his papa's shadow, the twins are first and foremost the stars in their grandmother's eyes. Leia begins excitedly telling Shmi of all their exciting adventures since they saw her last. Shmi listens patiently, attentively, occasionally throwing in a question or two about the exact storyline of their elaborate pretend games.
"I'm very glad to hear that you defeated the evil empire, and that you made sure your loyal companions, R2 and 3PO, got out safely as well. It's very important to win, of course, but even more important to win the right way and not sacrifice other people's freedom and happiness for your own. I am very, very happy to know you already understand this lesson. I have such wise grandchildren.
Luke and Leia beam and latch onto Shmi's skirt as she stands to her feet. She spots Ahsoka and Barris hovering a few meters away and tilts her head toward the ship just slightly. They nod and disappear as Shmi claps her hands together. She holds her hands out expectantly. Anakin ducks forward and presses a kiss to her cheek, stepping back to allow Obi-Wan to do the same. "Shmi, it is so good to see you." Obi-Wan greets warmly. He tilts his head. "I'm so very glad you could come."
"As I was glad to receive your invitation," Shmi replies, "considering how rarely you two ever come to visit me on Tatooine."
"You know how Anakin hates sand," Obi-Wan replies, lips twitching. Leia scowls.
Sand is yucky! Why do you live in such a terrible place, Grandma?
"It is my home, little dragon,"
Shmi replies fondly, ruffling Leia's carefully plaited hair.
"It may be harsh and ugly to some, but it is too bound up in who I am. Come now, I am in need of some food after that long journey. You and Luke can tell me all about your adventures over breakfast."
Luke and Leia clamber to lead the way toward the school's communal dining hall, skipping ahead as their grandmother and fathers follow close behind, fond smiles gracing their faces. "You came at a great time, Mom," Anakin begins conversationally, his eyes glinting with humor. "Guess who else is visiting?" Shmi pauses for a moment, then smiles widely as understanding nods.
"Mace is here?"
"Yup," Anakin replies, popping the P. He and Dappa are giving a series of lectures on the history of traditional saber forms, culminating in an explanation and demonstration of the Vapad. "It's quite popular," Obi-Wan chimes in. "We had to move it outdoors just to get enough space."
"Truly? Or is he just hiding from the Senate again?"
Shmi asks, amused. The Yavinists held a strict no politics rule. Both Obi-Wan and Plo Koon felt the Orthodox Jedi had failed to keep themselves sufficiently separated from the whims of the Senate and refused to allow any official political business to take place on Yavin. As a result, the Yavin 4 guest lecturer spot had become quite the coveted position for members of the High Council who relished the chance to escape the pestering of the Republic senators. "Father, really?" Obi-Wan admits softly. "Master Bilaba is considering taking another padawan, a young man named Ezra Bridger, and wishes to seek the blessing of Grey's brothers. Master Windu has accompanied her to lend his support." After the war, Master Bilaba had spent half a year on Yavin 4, recovering from the sudden, terrible loss of Caleb and Grey, but had ultimately decided that her path still lay with the Code and had returned to Coruscant. It had set a precedent, one that had finally convinced Masters Mundi and Gallia that an independent sect would not tear the Order apart, but ultimately make it stronger. Many Orthodox Jedi came to visit Yavin 4 and try life outside the confines of the Code, but the majority decided to return to the fold, their purpose and faith restored, by the knowledge that they had tried another way and still believed the Code was the best path forward.
"I'm so very happy for her," Shmi says. They duck through the worn stone entryway, their footsteps echoing against the flagstones. "Isn't Ezra the orphaned youngling that her vision of Caleb led her to?"
"Yes," Anakin confirms. "She's carefully followed his progress ever since she brought him back to the temple, and now wants to claim him as soon as he's of age. Her visions have recently returned, and Master Yoda believes Caleb's Force ghost is trying to play matchmaker."
"I'm sure Mace is overjoyed. I know how anxious he is for another Grand Padawan. Not that he would ever say anything to Dappa,"
Shmi says with a shake of her head.
"Didn't want to pressure her."
"For all that you two fight like feral lothcats, I do believe you are Master Windu's best friend," Obi-Wan says dryly. Shmi looks vaguely horrified. "I don't think he's confessed that to anyone else. Certainly not to me." Shmi is saved from responding by the arrival in the bustling, towering main commissary, wide skylights bathing the room in the morning light. When they had first arrived, this room had been half destroyed, roof completely gone, but over the months of rebuilding, he and Anakin had grown unbearably fond of the open roof. Yes, okay, they had criffed here once or twice, pushing their sleeping bags together as the stars spun above, and had decided to install a transparent steel canopy rather than restore the roof to its original state. The room was bustling, Families, students, clones, and Jedi mingling freely in the large space and chatting as they use unleavened bread to scoop a rice and egg mixture into their mouths. Plo Koon raises a hand in greeting from across the room, where he sits with Wolf and the rest of the wolf pack. Grandma! Luke tugs at her sleeve to capture her attention, and moving determinedly towards where Ayla and Bly sit, a shared sleepless look in their eyes that Obi-Wan remembers all too well from raising two newborns.
He loves his children.
But he doesn't miss those days, not at all. Come see baby too! He's really, really cute! Ayla smiles, warm but exhausted, as Obi-Wan, Anakin, the twins, and Shmi fold themselves down onto the benches to join their little breakfast group. 3 other younglings chase each other in circles around the table and cry out in joy at seeing Luke and Leia. Bly tries to wrangle a spoon of oatmeal into a toddler's mouth as a set of older teens watch their siblings with a particular embarrassment that only teenagers can express. For some reason, all those years ago, when Quinlan had told Obi-Wan that Ayla and Bly wanted to raise a bunch of bouncing babies, Obi-Wan had just blithely assumed that Quinlan was exaggerating for effect. Many of the clones and their partners had difficulty conceiving, a side effect of all the changes wrought on their genetic structure by the Kaminoans, and then all the treatments they had gone through to undo those changes. But Ayla and Bly hadn't let that slow them down for a moment, adopting a whole host of orphan Twi'leks and young, not yet decanted clones who had been seized from the Kaminoans at the end of the war. They were up to 10 and still counting. The oldest of their sons and daughters had been preteens when Ayla and Bly had adopted them, and so were now young adults, forging their own way in the galaxy. Ayla gestured to the communal plates in front of her as Luke and Leia pressed closer, trying to sneak a peek at the newest addition to the Sakura family. Ayla smiles indulgently and shifts the traditional Twi'leki woven wrap to allow them a better look at the still slumbering baby. Kote, the Sakura youngling closest to Luke and Leia's age, rolls his eyes and gives them both a hard poke, trying to entice them to join him and his other siblings in their game of tag. Luke and Leia, predictably, are outraged and jump up to return the favor. Bly juggles the toddler in his hands expertly. Good to see you, Shmi, he says with a nod.
And you, little Sela has grown quite big since I was last here,
she says, extending a finger for the toddler in question to wrap her hand around. Sela babbles and Shmi nods very seriously, as if they are having a very serious, coherent conversation.
Ah, of course. Thank you for pointing that out, little dancer.
How long are you visiting for this time? Ayla asks. Shmi glances to Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Only a few days, I should think.
Shmi replies. Obi-Wan nodded in agreement. All he needs are a few hours of quality time alone with Shmi to secure her blessing. A few days was plenty of time to find a sufficient excuse for sending Anakin and the twins off on their own. He only pays half a mind to the rest of the conversation, his thoughts currently focused on planning his proposal to Anakin. He doesn't want it to be too overblown, but Anakin does like soap opera-worthy declarations of love, and so Obi-Wan thinks he might go with hand-picked flowers and a poem-like proposal speech. A worried, gentle prod pulls him from his thoughts, and he meets Anakin's eyes across the table. He's shielding tightly, so he's confident that none of his thoughts escaped, but they so rarely block any parts of their minds off from each other these days that the very act of shielding probably attracted Anakin's attention. He flashes a warm, loving smile at Anakin. Nothing to worry about, dear one, he reassures Anakin. His trust in Obi-Wan is absolute, and so his dear, guileless lover accepts Obi-Wan's explanation unhesitatingly, and they turn back to the breakfast conversation without further ado. So I'm asking for your blessing, Obi-Wan finishes, inexplicably nervous. He looks expectantly to Shmi and is taken aback by the decidedly stony cast to her impassive face. I know it may be a little overdue at this point, but Shmi, I apologize, but I seem to have offended you, and I never meant to. What did I say? Shmi says nothing for a long moment, taking a long sip of her tzai as they sit in the kitchen of her guest quarters on the 3rd day of her visit. Anakin had agreed to take the twins back to their house so that Shmi and Obi-Wan can have the afternoon to themselves, free of the distractions Luke and Leia so effortlessly and unintentionally provided. The conversation had gone well, at least at first, but now Obi-Wan wants to fiddle with his teacup as if he is a naughty child once more.
Our traditions not good enough for you? I know they are not legally binding in the core, and I suppose it is natural to want a wedding ceremony following your own beliefs, but I must admit, it hurts me to know that you place such little weight upon my people's beliefs.
What? Obi-Wan blinks, completely wrong-footed.
You act as if you and Anakin are not already married,
Shmi says, as if that is an explanation. She looks down at the table with a light furrow between her brows. Because we're not? Obi-Wan replies, an edge of hysteria creeping into his voice. Unless I'm completely forgetting something really important, Anakin and I have never gotten married.
But I've seen you teaching Luke and Leia how to make tzai,
Shmi insists.
and I've tasted it. You two added another ingredient.
Obi-Wan opens, then closes his mouth. Shmi, he says in what he thinks is an admirably calm voice. Can you explain exactly what a marriage ceremony on Tatooine entails? She regards him silently for a moment.
The poor never recognized our marriages, tried to take them from us as they stole everything else, so we could not use trinkets or jewelry to mark our commitment, not like you do in the core. Instead, we had to share something that their poor could never take away. Tzai. When two slaves wished to get married, they teach each other their family recipes and find a new way to blend them together. And after that, they're married. It's not really a big ceremony or celebration, but it's still important. Didn't Annie explain all of this?
No, he did not.
You mean, did he explain any of this?
No, I was under the impression that showing tzai was indicative solely of my adoption into the Skywalker family.
Yes, sharing tzai.
She clarifies, still seeming shocked.
But learning the recipe, making your own variation, though that's definitely a marriage. But how long ago was this? I know it was before Luke and Leia were born, but...
It was shortly after the Clone Wars started, Obi-Wan says, finishing the last of its tzai and quickly, efficiently beginning to clear the detritus off the table. Shmi rings rapidly. We weren't even together at the time. He was still technically my padawan.
Ah, Annie, really?
Shmi sighs. Obi-Wan finishes his cleaning and stands to his feet. Now, if you'll excuse me, Shmi, it appears I have a husband to murder!
By all means,
She says with a shake of her head.
if it's not too much trouble, I'd like a go at him once you're finished. Marrying you without your knowledge or consent, what was he thinking?
Force only knows, Obi-Wan replies as he storms out of Shmi's guest quarters. There must be something in his face or brewing in the force around him, because for once not a single person stops Obi-Wan. A few clones and a Yavinist hastily jump out of his way. Another pair stop one of their new visitors from stepping in his path with a hushed whisper. All the others watch him, wide-eyed, as leaves crackle and branches snap underneath his boots. He stomps into his house and surveys the scene unfolding in the main living area. Luke, Leia, Anakin, and R2 currently engaged in a rendition of their favorite game. Let's see how many objects Daddy can float at once, including us. Anakin Skywalker! Obi-Wan booms from the entryway, hands on his hips and feet planted militantly. Luke, Leia, and Anakin all look up as one, freezing guiltily in place. Luke and Leia hover awkwardly in the air, arrested mid-giggle. Obi-Wan uses a hand to gently but firmly lower them to the ground. They all watch him with wide eyes, and R2 shuffles from side to side to express his discomfort. Obi-Wan stops closer. He hears whispers of relief as he bypasses Luke and Leia while Anakin holds his hands up in a placating gesture of surrender. Obi-Wan goes toe-to-toe with him, their chests practically touching, and glares. I don't know what I did this time, and I'm sure I deserve it, whatever it is. Anakin begins hastily, but I would also like to take this time to remind you that you love me very, very much. So much you took on like 3 old Sith Lords and helped reform 2 millennia-old bureaucracies. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Obi-Wan pokes at his chest with a single finger, eyes narrowed. You're right, I do love you, he says, jabbing his finger to emphasize his point. So much so that I was going to ask you to marry me. I had plans, big romantic plans, involving a private resort, 500-count real silk sheets, and absolutely no twins. Hey! He hears Luke exclaim in an offended tone before he is hastily shushed by his sister. Anakin's eyes have turned all gooey. You want to get married, he breathes. Of course I do, dear one. Obi-Wan's voice softens momentarily despite himself. The only reason I haven't asked before now is because, well, you're my best friend, my brother, my lover, the father of my children, the burning supernova around which everything I am rotates. A piece of legal flimsy-plas saying that we agreed to bind ourselves together seemed redundant. Anakin gives him an odd look, but somehow this is what spurs Obi-Wan to regain his feelings of righteous indignation. So imagine how I felt when I found out that all my plans were ruined because not only were we already married, but my complete nerve-herder of a husband had failed to inform me of that fact for over 12 years! Anakin freezes in place, eyes growing as wide as saucers. Daddy's in trouble! Leia crows, grinning madly at Luke. Aha. Oops. Oops! I find out that you married me over a decade ago in a secret tea ceremony, and all you have to say is, oops! I hope you enjoy the couch, Anakin Skywalker, because that is the only place you're sleeping for the next 12 years! Obi-Wan dearest spread his light on my life. Wait, what? Where are you taking me? Luke! Leia! Follow me!
Where are we taking Daddy, Papa?
To find your Uncle Plo. He's going to be officiating your father and I's second wedding in public right now! Wait, huh? I thought you just said... This makes no sense.
Silly Daddy, it makes perfect sense. You've been married for years your way, but now it's Papa's turn to show you how much he loves you. It wasn't very nice of you to keep that all to yourself.
Very good, Leia. Thank you. It's so reassuring to see that our daughter did not inherit her brains from you! Do I get any say in this? I don't know. Did I get any say 12 years ago? You're never going to let this go, are you? He doesn't. Chin up, dear one. All our friends will be there. It will be beautiful. It is. Rex surreptitiously wipes a tear from his eye. Can we at least put it aside for next couple of weeks or so? I would really like to not spend my entire honeymoon exiled on the couch. He does, in fact, spend the entire honeymoon on the couch. I am a man of principle. Of course, Obi-Wan caves after the first day, and they end up having completely wild makeup sex all over said couch, the kitchen counters, the balcony, and practically every surface in the private resort suite. Everything except the bed, which Obi-Wan forswears out of vindictive spite. And I love you for it. He does. Force help me, I can't believe I'm saying this out of the stunt you just pulled, but yes, I love you too. He really does. And he may have banned Anakin from the bed, but he has said nothing about joining his husband on the couch, so after everything is said and done, they fall asleep curled together in the too small space of the couch, because Obi-Wan may be a man of principle, but he still loves his husband most of all. End of If I Only Knew by Wanderlove. If you enjoyed this recording or the content, feel free to leave a comment below, a review at the original story from the link in the descriptions, or become a member to support this channel. Thank you for listening.